Institute, Vice Admiral Pete Daly, and AFCEA International to welcome Admiral Tim Keating and his panel. Sir.
Thank you, John. Thank you all. Is Pete here? Do I? We'll see him later on. Thank you all for coming to spend some time with us, to spend some time with these guys, of course. A couple of thoughts occur to me listening to John's gracious introduction. And that was a very good introduction, John. Thank you. Largely accurate and not too, you didn't hyperventilate too much. Although, in the interest of full disclosure amongst friends, that was a wonderful introduction, but it wasn't the best I've ever had. It was very good, but it wasn't the best I've ever had. So, when I introduced myself in Opelika, Florida, before a very small group, that was a great introduction that I gave myself. I could run on at some length about the merits of joint duty and how pivotal Goldwater-Nichols has been, remains, and will be for all of us in and out of uniform. But it occurred to me driving over here today that the best way to start this is to let these guys tell you about themselves first. I read their short bios and find this to be an eminently interesting group on paper. I spent a couple minutes upstairs with them. They're even better in person, and I suspect that you will join me in admiring their service, admiring their commitment, admiring the work that they do for us as a result of their loyalty to their service and as joint warriors. And in sessions like this, it's my experience, having done it as many here have once or twice, when they get done talking and we throw it open to the audience, there's always a kind of a pregnant pause. So I will reserve the right to ask the first question, and then the ice will be broken, and you all can then begin peppering them with all manner of Nolan Ryan fastballs right at their chin, and these are the right guys to answer us. To my immediate left, to your right, Major Chris Bowers, United States Army. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, sir. I'm Major Chris Bowers, hometown Virginia Beach, Virginia. Entered the Army through ROTC from the University of Richmond in 2001, just in time for 9/11. Commissioned in the infantry branch in the U.S. Army. My first assignment was in Korea with the United Nations Command Honor Guard. Following that, I went to 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia. Missed out on their invasion of Iraq, but I was there with them when they went back in 2005 to Sadr City in Baghdad. When I was there, I was the headquarters company executive officer, and then I was the military transition team MIT team leader with 306th Iraqi Army Battalion. Following that deployment, came back, went to the infantry captain's career course in Fort Benning, Georgia. Then I went to the 101st Airborne Division, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I went to 2nd Brigade, joined 1st Battalion, 502nd Infantry, where I took command of Charlie Company. Went through the whole train-up with those guys, went to Iraq with them, northwest Baghdad in the Qadamiyya district. After coming back, briefly took command of the headquarters and headquarters company, first to the 502nd Infantry until I PCS'd. Went to the Advanced Civil Schooling Program at Georgetown University, got my master's degree there. Following that, went to my first phase of ILE, or CGSC, at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And after that, became a Functional Area 59 Strategic Plans and Policy Analyst, which is my current job title, and went to U.S. Army TRADOC, Army Capabilities Integration Center at Fort Eustis, Virginia, where I'm currently the head of Integration and Analysis Branch in the Future Warfare Division. That's me.
Judge?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Captain Brett Swaim, and it's interesting. My boss, before I came over here today, he said, "Don't tell them that you're a judge advocate. Let them figure it out later, but otherwise they're going to just think you're a lawyer and throw lawyer questions at you." And then upon meeting Admiral Keating this afternoon, he said, "Judge, welcome aboard." And I thought, well, I guess that's gone. So, you know I'm a lawyer, so we'll just get it out there and get it out of the way. I had an interesting entrance into the Marine Corps. In fact, I went to the recruiter back in 2000 after I graduated college, thinking I was going to get a commission and sail into the Marine Corps and do great things. And I hit a speed bump. We didn't have any contracts available. I was going to have to wait a while. I said, well, I can't really wait. What else? Is there something else I could do? And the officer selection officer said, well, I need lawyers. What do you think about law school? And I said, well, I'll think about it. Long story short, here I am as a judge advocate in the Marine Corps. Applied to law school, went to Ohio Northern University in Ada, Ohio, and went to officer candidate school for my summer job. Upon coming on to active duty after Naval Justice School, I went down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where my first job was working on the SJA staff for a three-star commanding general of 2MEF. Big shoes to fill as a young lieutenant, but it was a great opportunity to get a larger view than the typical lieutenant coming into the Marine Corps, working as, say, a platoon commander in a infantry battalion. At any rate, I did that for a year, and then I had the opportunity to deploy to Iraq, Anbar Province, Ramadi, the capital city, with 1st Battalion, 9th Marines. And it was a great time to be in Iraq. It was a great time to be in Ramadi for me and for the battalion. We literally were the only Marine command, probably within 50 or 60 clicks. So we had, again, the provincial capital city and 1 battalion of Marines to operate that. So I had a lot of experiences there, handling detainees. Detainee operations was a big piece. Rule of law was also an exciting piece for me to work, getting to work with the judges and the local prosecutors as their criminal justice system began to get back on track at that time. Came back from that and had an opportunity to be a prosecutor for the government. Did that for a year and then did legal assistance as well before I was pulled to go up to our Expeditionary Warfare School, our captain's course, for a year, where it was a great opportunity to get exposed to other MOSs and kind of rub elbows with more than just lawyers for a year. Now I'm actually here in Virginia Beach. I'm up the road at Fort Story, Virginia, where the Marine Corps has hidden its Security Cooperation Group. And in that billet, I am the SJA to a Marine colonel commanding there. But really, I spend most of my time working operations and primarily planning and preparing for all the security cooperation teams that the Marine Corps sends downrange, primarily teaching them law of war, rules of engagement, human rights, and then also the more interesting piece, I think, is what is their legal status as these teams go to foreign countries where we don't have a developed command structure in place. So that's what I've been doing for the last year, and with that, sir, thank you, and I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Judge. Pleasure to introduce Cheese Pressler, who all of you would agree is one of the 3 best F-18 pilots in the room. Cheese.
Thanks, sir. My name is Lieutenant Commander James Pressler. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona. I graduated from Embry-Riddle, but prior to going to college, you have to sit here and imagine me in a mullet and a yellow IROC Z, and that's pretty much where I started. So I went from my Motley Crue days to somehow racing motocross, breaking almost every bone in my body, and then deciding through natural selection that I needed to do something a little faster and a little bigger and a lot more expensive, and something that my mother couldn't take away. So here I am flying F-18s. I went through the normal piecemeal of Corpus Christi to, then I went to Miramar to fly with the Marines while I learned how to fly the F-18. And then lucky enough, I've been out here in Oceana ever since flying single-seat Hornets. So I've done, my first fleet squadron was VF-87, the Golden Warriors, and there I did a tour in Iraq on the Theodore Roosevelt. And then following that, I came back. I did 3 years here as a VFA-106 RAG instructor. So I stayed here training the fleet's finest, which was probably the most fulfilling job I've ever done. And then following that, I did my department head tour at VF-81, which was a great experience. And there I got to do, I got to stay here on the East Coast and do a West Coast deployment along the USS Carl Vinson. And that's kind of a miraculous story in the sense that I was one of the 5 of 13 people that got to walk on that day. And the ship pulled out, and then next thing you know, instead of sailing around South America, we were headed straight to Haiti. So I got to do some relief effort there alongside Admiral Branch. And then following that, after 3 years of doing my department head tour there, I also did a tour of Afghanistan, and I did way too many night traps on that tour. And then following that, I came back, and then I also got to work alongside Admiral Branch again with the ComNav Airland here. And currently my current assignment is I'm the VFA Readiness Officer and the NCA Officer, so I manage basically all the weapons and training assets for all the squadrons throughout the United States. Sir?
Thanks, Cheese. Dave DiPiazza. David.
Thanks, sir. Captain Dave DiPiazza, graduated from Notre Dame with an electrical engineering degree. Started the Air Force career as a comm officer, actually. Worked some network, cyber, and then moved on to ISR before cross-training to be a combat rescue officer. Emerging career field that I found out about, so I was pretty excited. Really dealt with PR and just kind of lay the groundwork here. It's personal recovery, not public relations. And we do everything from the preparation, planning, the execution, and adapting to the PR event. So anytime somebody gets isolated, that's what we're going to do. Working with SEER specialists, pararescuemen, really sounded exciting to me. So I took the task of entering the pipeline and assessing. Got picked up, got all my quals between combat dive, airborne free fall, and all the follow-on skill sets required for doing the mission. And then immediately went to Afghanistan for about the next 2.5, 3 years, so on and off. While we were there, we just had the honor of going and responding to aircraft crashes, people that were trapped in vehicle wreckage, our brothers that were lost either in a canal or in open water, and performed those recoveries, brought as many home as we could alive, and then as well as our fallen angels, brought those guys back and paid them due respects back to their families. Right now, I'm actually on staff at ACC, and there I'm the functional area manager, so basically managing the deployment cycle and all the equipment and kit for the teams out there that are still doing the job. That's all I have, sir.
David, thank you. United States Coast Guard, and a personal comment, when I had the great privilege of living in Colorado Springs, working with, amongst others, Nancy Brown, I developed an intense appreciation for the work that our United States Coast Guard does for us. You all recognize while they're not in the Department of Defense, I would say that's on flow chart only. The guys and girls of our Coast Guard are doing remarkable work for us around the globe. And I also enjoyed the remarkable work they do while we were in Bahrain. So we'll let Grant Thomas tell us a little bit about himself and the command that he currently enjoys. Grant?
Thank you very much, Admiral. Good afternoon. Lieutenant Grant Thomas. I came into the Coast Guard in 2003. I graduated from college from the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, as a political science major. Spent about 1.5 years working in the fire service, and as I was applying to officer candidate school. Upon commissioning, we were actually the last group of officers commissioned under the Department of Transportation. Following subsequent Coast Guard Academy class that graduated in 2003 was the first group of officers to be commissioned under the Department of Homeland Security. So an interesting time to come into the service as it was transitioning between the two departments, and a lot of missions were changing. First assignment was aboard Coast Guard Cutter Bear, which is here out of Portsmouth. Spent 2 years aboard her, started out as the weapons officer, and second year went into a department head position. Our missions aboard her were mainly counter-narcotics, working for the Joint Interagency Task Force down out of Key West, doing drug interdiction with an armed helicopter aboard, and deploying a chase boat, which I would lead a boarding party with to do mainly cocaine interdiction coming out of South America. Upon completion of my assignment there, was fortunate enough to go to a pre-commissioning detachment to commission Coast Guard Cutter Tiger Shark as plank owner commanding officer. Picked her up from Bollinger Shipyard down in Louisiana and sailed around the East Coast up to Newport, Rhode Island, where she was placed into commission. Did 2 years aboard her before going to a flag aid position, which I did for 2 years, 1 year in Washington, D.C., and then a year here in Portsmouth. Upon completion of that, spent a year as commanding officer of Coast Guard Cutter Monomoy, which is one of our 6 forward deployed 110-foot patrol boats in the 5th Fleet NAVCENT AOR, based out of Bahrain, but spent most all of our patrol time up off the 2 oil platforms in Iraqi territorial waters. Was also fortunate enough to spend a month in Qasr training the Iraqi Navy as we were working to have them transition over to the oil platform security mission, taking that mission on themselves to be able to provide the security for those 2 platforms, and that's the lifeblood of the Iraqi economy as they export oil offshore there. Upon completion of that assignment in 2010, returned stateside to same platform cutter, Coast Guard cutter Block Island, where I'm in command currently down in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina.
First question will come from the gray-haired guy at the end of the table, and we'll start with Chris. And each of you, I would ask you to answer in turn from as we work our way, rock and ripple our way down the line. You all have experience, quote, in theater, unquote, and several of you have staff experience or are getting it now. It would seem to me if I put myself in your shoes, having been engaged in our country's wars for the past 10 years, as you now come into kind of middle management, the 04, 05 area, and you read the papers and listen to the news and old guys expound about the perils we confront in our national economy and in particular Department of Defense, are you optimistic, neutral, or pessimistic about where your individual service will be narrowly and where we as a department will be writ more broadly 5 years from now? So please take a look from where you sit. How does it look 5 years from now?
Thank you, sir. Well, I have a confession to make. I'm naturally an optimistic person, so that probably influences my answer, which is to say that I'm optimistic about where we'll be in the next 5 years. Everyone in the service, everyone in this room understands that we're going to have to operate our joint force in an era of austerity. There's going to be cuts. We're going to have less people. We're going to have less stuff. And we're probably going to have just as much to do. And we're going to have to figure out a way to do it. The common denominator that I see is people. And I see initiatives across the services to attract, recruit, build, and retain better people, smarter, more resilient, wiser, more mature people who can bridge the gap between having less and having to accomplish just as much or maybe even more from time to time. So I think that as we move forward, if we continue to focus on getting the right people, developing them, keeping them, and setting them up for success, I think that's going to be the key enabler that's going to help us accomplish our mission across the joint force.
Thanks, Chris. Judge?
Sir, I agree with that. In the Marine Corps, I think we're definitely working harder to develop more quality. It's not the quantity, but it's the quality. And really, I see that right now in the security cooperation arena. I mean, yes, Afghanistan OEF is still the focus, as it should be. But in the Marine Corps, we've seen a tremendous uptick in the requirements and requests from the regional Marine Force commanders asking for security cooperation teams to push forward. So rather than sending a battalion of, say, anywhere from 600 to 800 Marines downrange, we're talking about taking a team of highly trained, developed, mid-level folks and putting them downrange. 10, 15, maybe 20 packs is what I'm talking about. Now, we can do that right now, and we can do that for the near future because we have all this experience that we have gained, that Marines have gained in combat, Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 10 years. The challenge comes a few years down the road where all of a sudden we start running out of that talent pool, or we're done reusing that same talent pool, and we're looking to the corporals and the sergeants who never really did a combat deployment. Not that it's all about combat, but that's where most of us have cut our teeth and have learned the hardest lessons the quickest. So yes, I think I'm an optimistic, but one concern I do see that I'll just put out there is we are, in the Marine Corps, I think as all services, we are aggressively downsizing as we off-ramp OIF, obviously, and now OEF. So the fingers crossed moment, I think, for the Marines and probably for the other services, I suspect, is, geez, I hope nothing really big happens 5 years from now. We're going to have a right-sized force, as my commandant likes to say, a middleweight force, and I think we're doing the things within the Marine Corps to get there. But yes, we're not going to have the exact same capabilities that we had when we were 202,000 as we whittled down to somewhere probably around 180,000.
Chief.
Thanks, sir. I'm going to second a lot of the comments that the gentleman to my right have kind of said, but the big thing here is, yeah, we are downsizing, and I'm certainly optimistic in 5 years, because right now it's really a matter of, do you want to be here? Do you want to serve, the United States and be in the military? And in the programs we have going forth right now, whether it's just as something as small as like a physical fitness test, there's really no tolerance for anyone that doesn't meet the standard. And if you don't meet the standard, you're going to go, and you're going to go find work elsewhere. And that's the kind of standard. It's kind of like a football team where you set yourself up, you pick your players, and we're going to pick the best players, and the people that don't make the team don't make the team. And that's the way it should be. And if we're going to set up programs to make that happen, that's what we need to do. So I'm pretty optimistic about the team we're going to pick here in 5 years.
David?
Yeah, I think that the teams are going to make it happen no matter what gear they're given or what training they have. They're going to make it happen. The question is how well they're going to be able to do it. And all the talk about the budget cuts and how many resources they're going to have, from where I'm sitting, and that's how I'm going to answer the question, I feel like it's not really my job to worry about the budget cuts. I feel like it's my job to continually present my leaders with ways that I can make my force better. So they can choose what they want to invest in or what they don't want to invest in, but I feel like if I prevent myself from offering up a solution or offering up a way to make the team better, then I'm not doing my job correctly. So, as a senior captain, junior major, sitting on the staff that's trying to get new equipment or reorganize, find training dollars for my guys, I'm going to keep presenting those options. And then 5 years from now, I'm hoping that my leaders have chosen to invest in the right capabilities with the budget that they do have and the budget that they're managing.
Thank you, David. Grant?
Admiral, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm constantly impressed with the quality of people that we're getting within the Coast Guard, both on the officer and the enlisted side. We're getting junior enlisted that are coming in with advanced education, with master's degrees. It's very encouraging on that front. Where my concern lies is with the age of the assets that we have in the Coast Guard, the boats, the planes, and the cutters. A number of our cutters would be eligible for Social Security. We have ships that are just falling apart, and as money gets tight and acquisition programs have to be cut, really going to limit service options as to where we're able to apply Coast Guard assets and which missions we take on.
Thanks, boys. Out to the floor. What's on your mind? Admiral Daly, top of the afternoon, sir.
Admiral Keating, I would like to ask the panel to tell us from your perspective as O3s and O4s, if you could change one thing, something that frustrates you at the O3, O4 level, and you could make the change. You could say, I could get this one thing done in your respective services or within your warfighting expertise. What might that be?
I can answer that, sir. In my opinion, the one thing that can be frustrating in my work is, like I talked about, kind of the downsizing and where we're headed and picking the right force. The part that needs to be told to me as a leader is what are you willing to give up? You can't maintain the same exact standard and level of readiness with less people. So I just need to know where the risk is. If you want to do one thing, if you want to do it all, I need the people to do it. If you want to downsize, what do you want to give up in the meantime? What is no longer important to you, so I can basically put my assets and allocate them accordingly.
Put yourself in Admiral Brance's shoes, and you are now Comm Nav Air Land for a day. To Pete's question, what up would you make down? What left would you make right? What one would you make zero? And you don't have to worry about anybody senior to you in the room asking you to come to their office after this is over, saying what part of my policy didn't you like? I mean, anyway, what one thing would you say, I'm not going to make us do this anymore? Night bounce, flight suits off base, got to have $50 in your wallet whenever you go over the beach. One thing, what would you change?
Sir, if this is a place for me to try to get flight suits off base, I'm going to start that process right now.
Okay. Anybody else? One thing would you change?
I'll throw this out there, and for those of you who ever had an opportunity like this, it's very humbling and a little bit awkward to be a company grade officer, and you look out and you see, if I see a major 04, it's like, wow, there's another young guy. I don't mean age, it's not an age thing, but it's 05s, 06s, and stars like crazy. So I'll throw one tactical thing out there. This is just kind of a personal thing for me. I want to see, and I know we'll get there, so I'm not sweating it, but offensive cyber capabilities pushed down to lower levels than what we have today. So, and I'll just kind of leave it in the broader context, but there's been a lot of discussion on this, and of course, this is one where, the lawyers tend to weigh in when we're talking about rules of engagement and what can a commander do, what can't a commander do. This is one thing, it's an emerging thing that I see our commanders' hands being tied, and that's one thing. If I had the ability for a day, if I was king for a day, I suppose that's something I would push more aggressively to get something down to the operating forces that they can actually take for action.
Great thing. Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, I know this is an initiative that's already going on in the Army, so I'm going to speak directly to that, and I actually don't know if there's any analogous program or you're using the same thing in any of the other services, but the 360-degree assessment for leaders, use that aggressively, make it mandatory, and when you rate your subordinates, you must look at their 360 and see what their subordinates are saying about them. I can think of a few toxic leaders that I've encountered in my career, and I can think of some of my peers, people that I know who were fantastic leaders, nothing but promise, and they're wearing civilian clothes today because they served under a toxic leader. And some of those toxic leaders have continued to rise through the ranks, poisoning the military as they go. I think everyone in here has encountered guys just like that. And a 360 assessment, I think, is a great tool to identify those guys and take action on them before they can do too much damage to the service.
Dave, thoughts?
Yeah, as far as, I'll hit the tactical stuff first. The more that we can try to take light capabilities and apply them to the joint fight, and I'll speak to PR because that's what I know. We have forces that are duplicated across the services, and for good reason. They each need their own capability to bring their guys home. But the more that we can identify one single service to kind of take the lead, and then where possible, combine them into like a joint force. So if I have pararescuemen that are on a team and they can link up with perhaps a Marine rotary aircraft and perhaps have security from the Army, right there we've created a PR capability for the COCOM, and it's not just, hey, the Air Force has built an organic PR capability that's there for the Air Force. We, as much as we can, if we can find ways to take those capabilities and then offer them up to the whole. And on the big picture, and this is just kind of the queep stuff that drives people crazy, I think, is all the CBTs that we take, trying to get out the door. You spend like 20, 30 hours trying to take all that stuff, and a lot of the times, I think the guys just end up clicking right through those slides, and it would be I think it would make the process of deployment and coming out the door, back in the door, a lot better if we just stuck to a few key things that the guys need and leave it at that.
Thanks. Grant, any thoughts?
Quick plug for the 360-degree leadership evaluations. Couldn't concur more with that. Is just a good general leadership practice, and something that all the services should look at seriously at. The one thing that really seems to get me as a unit commander is our budgetary spending mechanisms and how we go about that, particularly with a year in a fiscal year where we have a continuing resolution. We don't get our full budget till the very or middle part of the fiscal year, and then there's a push for spending frenzy before spend down requirements. Not sure whether the DoD has the same push that DHS regularly does, where money gets spent on things that probably don't need to be purchased, but that there's a push for spending. And as we are looking to tighten the purse strings, if you will, or with budgets shrinking, looking at how we spend money wisely and do so as good stewards of the tax dollar will be crucially important and would be a change would need to make.
Thanks, Grant. Admiral, if you'll allow me, sir, to let the Petty Officer Third Class here, who's apparently on active duty and already has his enlisted aviation warfare specialty wings, I'm sure you'll yield the floor to him.
For it.
Your question, sir.
Thank you, sirs. I'm glad you all came here to talk to us, but as our budget continuously shrinks because of all these different reasons, which of the branches do you think gets the biggest part of the pie? Because we already know that if we wind down wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Army and the Marine Corps are not going to have to be as big as they used to be. I'm not saying we should shrink them down to a hollow force or anything like that, but which of the branches really deserves the biggest cut of the pie? Because in the end, some of you are not going to get as much pie as you want, while the rest of everyone else gets more. And you may not like it, but it's going to happen.
Air Force.
Navy.
We get our money through DHS, so I'll take myself out of this equation.
I'm a Marine. We do less with more. So what can I say? We somehow it's institutionalized that we pride ourselves on being penny pinchers and still getting things done. So, to be honest, and not to just throw your question out there, but there's a lot of things to talk about. Money's always an issue, but honestly, and again, I know I'm not the most senior guy here in the room, but fortunately, I've never been at a command where money has been the deciding factor in what we do. It may have some influence on how we do it, just in a very practical way, but we've always been able to get the money we needed to do the things that we absolutely had to do.
Well, I concur that I don't want the Army to become a hollow force. I have conversations almost every day about what the Army should and shouldn't cut, and all of the things that the Navy and the Air Force should be cutting. At the risk of not answering your question, let me turn it around and specifically for the Navy and the Air Force, what I hope they don't cut is a lot of the strategic lift capability that gets us to the fight. Whatever shape the Army ends up being in, whatever we look like, we are probably going to be a more CONUS-based force, and we're going to need a way to get to wherever it is we've got to do something for the people of the United States. So I certainly hope the Air Force and the Navy, our brothers on those sides, keep us in mind when they're deciding what programs they're going to support and not support, and we would definitely like some of the strategic lift to remain pretty robust.
And although I took myself out of the equation because we are a little bit different with falling under the Department of Homeland Security, I will add that the year that I spent over based out of Bahrain working for Fifth Fleet was extremely beneficial, not only for me, but to get to work with the Navy, the joint involvement over there with the British and other coalition countries that are participating in that effort. The parts of the Coast Guard that are funded through the Title X or the Department of Defense mission sets are hugely important. We have law enforcement detachments that are deployed aboard Navy ships that do drug interdiction. The Joint Interagency Task Force, JIADF South, down as part of a subset of Southcom, are parts of the Coast Guard that are funded through the Department of Defense and hugely important in protecting the homeland and even oversees critical infrastructure.
Before you go, I'll turn Admiral Daly's question around to you. You're now President of the United States, and with this pen, you can, now you just submit to Congress, as you know, the budget, but how would you write it, the budget next year?
Well, sir.
What would you exclude, and what would you take out, what would you plus up?
Well, sir, that's definitely a difficult question. I mean, I'm a young guy, so I don't have as much life experience as everyone else around me. But to be perfectly frank with you, I'm biased towards the Navy, no matter how you look at it, because we have two oceans on either side of us, and we have nations around us who they may be our allies, they may be anything like that, but they may one day decide to turn on us. And we need that Navy. We need that Navy to protect our commerce. We need the Navy to move our troops across the ocean and back. We need that capability. So we need a large Navy. I'm not saying we need 700, 800 ships, because that's not realistic anymore. It's not going to happen. But we need to have that capability no matter what. It's a lot easier to enlarge an Army or the Marine Corps than it is a Navy. Ships take a long time to build. So unless we can speed up the construction of our ships, we need to have a larger standing Navy than we do an Army at this time.
Okay, thanks very much. Admiral Mackey, former SINCPAC.
I would remind you, Tim, I'm an old man, and standing this long could have dire consequences. But
That's why I'm sitting.
I will yield to a brilliant 3PO any day of the week.
Right. Thanks.
Two questions. One, are we ready for a major conflict? Will we be in 2-3 years? Number two, the Navy has fired 12 commanding officers thus far this year. How does that affect your desire and your thoughts in going toward command in the future?
I'll start off, sir. I think we'd be absolutely ready for a major conflict. The guys are honed as sharp as they can be right now. There's a lot of talk about dwell and everyone's smoked, but I don't think so. I think that guys are chomping at the bit to get out the door. They're doing great things downrange, and their skills are absolutely on point right now. I see the more time we get away from actually being out the door, being downrange, we're going to get further and further away from having our skill sets ready to roll. As far as commanding officers not providing a good example, well, to me, the leaders I've had that have been the worst example, I've learned the most from, and that kind of gets me fired up to go take their spot and do a better job.
I kind of want to second that. I think we'll be prepared for a conflict in the future. Of course, I could caveat that with, the exact parameters of the conflict and the end state. What does success look like? What does victory look like in this conflict? But I think that we will retain the tools and will retain the ability to expand to tackle any conflict that I think we conceivably will face in the next 5 to 15, 20 years. Regarding the commanders who have been getting relieved, that actually it makes me optimistic. I think that shows that the services are paying attention to leaders of character and their ability to embody the traits and values that we want our leaders to have in the military, and are taking action to cut the dead wood instead of turning a blind eye for reasons of parochialism or some kind of an old boy network. So that encourages me that there really are standards being enforced, and makes me want to step up and take command at higher echelons.
I'm going to address it's 12, right? 12 Navy COs who have been relieved this year, I believe.
And a bunch of Army brigade commanders.
Okay, and some Army brigade commanders. I know of 1 or 2 Marine commanders, one in particular I can think of. So it's not unique to the Navy, but for me it's job security. I mean, this is one of those issues where the judge is brought in. So while sometimes it's job security, sometimes it's judge, where were you? What was going on? What kind of advice were you giving? So, but again, not to absolve the COs, but I think it's the nature of the environment we live in right now. with constant connectivity, the 24/7 news cycle, and things like YouTube and Twitter and all these social media aspects that, you know, the CO is hard on someone at work and they can go home and they can, you know, tweet about it. They don't even have to wait till they get home. They can do it on the drive home. They can tweet about what their boss did or what their CO did and things like that. So it is a challenge for commanders today. But again, I'm a staff guy, and so if you've got a CO who's going down the wrong path, again, I'm not absolving him or her of their transgressions, but my instant thought is, where's the staff, or where was the staff on this? And inevitably, it seems as you kind of peel back the onion on some of these specific instances, they may have done a little bit, they may have raised a red flag and, well, hey, sir, you know, maybe that's not such a good idea, and they stopped there. One of the difficult conversations I have with any commander that I advise as his SJA is getting him to understand that he's not the client. The U.S. government is my client. And so, you know, and sometimes that's an awkward conversation to have with a commander, but I think all the staff needs to understand that, yeah, okay, he's the boss, yes, he writes our fitness reports, and we want to please, and we want to do well. We don't want to get singled out. We're worried about our own careers, but ultimately, you know, our responsibility is to support and defend the Constitution, and sometimes that means, you know, if you've got to go above and beyond to rectify a situation that's getting out of hand, I think that's something that needs to be done very delicately, of course. It's, you know, I'm not saying this, it's obviously not an easy thing to do, but COs, yes, they're to blame, but I also look to the staff and say, hey, staff, it's time that we kind of roger up and take responsibility for our commands as well, and make sure that if our commander's making poor choices, we help get them back on track, and if the ship is beyond being righted, then we have to take additional action to ensure that the greater good for the service is maintained.
Thanks, Judge.
For on the warfighting piece, are we ready for the next conflict? I'm a little bit more pessimistic than the rest of the speakers have been. I think the big issue is that we have a lot of smart people that are looking really far forward to figure out when the next conflict is going to take place and when that's going to happen. I think my issue with it is not. I think that if the big one kicked off today, I think we do pretty well. But I think down the road, the big thing is to train costs money. And to build new technologies costs money. And I think the reluctancy that I think people have is they want it for free. And it kind of, from the guy that has to, you know, for the most part, tell the person writing the check that, hey, I need this many weapons, I need this many bombs to train with, and it's a lot of red tape to get it. I just, you know, back to the question that's earlier, what would I change, aside from the flight suits? It would be kind of hey, our leaders are asking for this, let's just get it for them. Because we've paid them and basically voted for them to be in those positions, to give them kind of empowerment and those decision-making ability. If they say they need it, they should just get it. Obviously with some justification. Back to the question about being a CO, I've worked for some really, really tough skippers. But like was said earlier, those are the guys that I learned the most from. And all the 12 skippers or whoever it was that, you know, who've been fired, I'd say maybe 2 of them I don't think were, you know, maybe not justified. So it's kind of, you don't ask to be a skipper with the risk of being fired. You want to be a skipper because you care about the people and you want to lead. So as long as you do what you feel is what is the right thing, you're the one that has to go to sleep at night to live with it. So that's the kind of job that I want.
Admiral, in reverse order, I will say I'm very fortunate that, and don't take for granted at all, that I'm on my third command, afloat command tour. Having said that, I know that it could end at any point with one bad decision, whether that be personal conduct, ethics, or command climate, which seems to be one that has been rampant recently with problems. Seems that oftentimes the arrogance of command is what ends up leading to the downfall of people that make either bad personal choices, often linked to the use of alcohol, or with regards to how they treat people in that they are the commanding officer in charge. So I think it's crucially important, and I think it gets back to the benefit of the 360-degree evaluations and really taking a holistic approach to being in command and what that means as a steward of the tax dollars, but also as somebody that has a huge impact on the people that are working for and working with you. With regards to are we ready? I think as a country, and what I saw spending the time in the NAVCENT AOR and exercises like Bold Alligator that occurred this past year, I think as a whole, especially with a strong coalition with other nation states, other countries serving as partners, we are ready. Having said that, I will qualify that if the Navy was to need to reach down into the Coast Guard and have us transfer to the Navy as we did in World War II, I think they would be sorely upset with the condition of our fleet, in that it seems like whenever a large Coast Guard cutter is trying to keep up with a Navy battle group or a carrier strike group, it doesn't end up happening because we're so slow and end up breaking down, coupled with the fact that our weapon systems are quite antiquated. We're slowly modernizing our fleet, but on a whole, for warfighting capabilities, we have a long way to come. Having said that, for our search and rescue missions and a lot of the other missions, law enforcement, our Title 14 DHS missions, we do stand ready, but it's starting to head, the track line's starting to head towards shoal water if don't get some new assets online.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Padial Sugathier, Secretary Stratcom. The last 10 years have been remarkable for the military. All the lives that we have lived have been fairly unique even throughout history. Going forward, when you have new men under your charge and they've not lived through these last 10 years, what are the sea stories you're going to go ahead and tell them? For instance, I'm a sailor who spent a year in Afghanistan wearing ACUs. I tell a sailor who's being born today that story, they're probably not going to believe it. They're going to have no context to place that in. So what is it that you're going to impress upon your guys for sea stories that you've gotten from the last couple of years?
Pretty much, I have two for you, actually, for kind of the stories that I like to tell. The first one would be, I did essentially 2 tours in Iraq. And the first time I went into Iraq, overhead, helping out the guys on the ground, obviously, when I showed up there the first time, there were airplanes everywhere. Tankers, every force you could possibly imagine that were out there. And I actually lost a good buddy in a mid-air collision in Iraq as well. So to go back, 3-4 years later, I was over that same piece of sky, looking on the ground, and going back, when I was over there, it was completely rubbish everywhere you went. Everything had been blown up. But then to go back, 4 or 5 years later, I was over that same piece of ground, and from 10,000 feet, I could watch 2 kids playing basketball. So I immediately went back and wrote a whole email about how awesome it was to see that. And you could actually have seen all the good that we have done over the few years. The other part of it is watching the relief from Haiti, to basically take an aircraft carrier that was full of, that basically was empty, to swing by Jacksonville, pick up dozens of helicopters, and then race down there in, a day and a half to get down there and help that out, and then literally walk on boots on the ground to go in that country. And luckily, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the game Jenga. That's pretty much what those houses were built like. So all it took was a little, wolf to go over and blow them down, and sure enough, and we essentially went in there and helped everybody out. And those are the 2 stories that I like telling.
I don't have a specific story that's worth sharing, but I think just the lessons that in the Marine Corps we've learned, over and over again for hundreds of years, and it's just the ability to adapt, overcome, and just the bottom line is just be flexible in everything you do. Every day it's something different, it's something unique. Like one thing that we try to do in our shop is just get guys out, we do a lot of country assessments where we'll send a team of 20 Marines to, you name the country, and they're going to assess the capabilities and the shortfalls of that service in that foreign country. We're constantly looking for opportunities to get guys from the office on those teams and out the door. Just just to break up the monotony, just so they understand, just to get a taste or a flavor of what it even means to go downrange and operate. And again, this is not combat specific. It's advising, it's assisting, it's assessing. But it's still just being able to be an independent operator. Hey, we send a small team downrange. They've got minimal comm gear, minimal ability to support themselves, and we're just trusting that they're going to make the right decisions and do the right things. And sometimes it's a little, it's one of these rare moments in my career where I can take a step back and just kind of say, holy crap, I can't believe we're doing that. Or just talking to, a mid-level Marine, whether he's a staff NCO or a captain or a major, and say, wow, we're putting a lot of trust and confidence in you today, sending you downrange to do what we're asking you to do. So again, but trying to get more of those experiences to guys to understand that, hey, the 9 to 5 thing, and I see that with some of the younger guys, they come in and they see it as, hey, it's 9 to 5, and this is not that job. And I think that's one of the challenges that as a DoD as a whole, we're going to have to continue to work to make sure that our men and women under our charge are not falling into that trap because we're not, hey, we're working up for the next deployment. Well, that isn't necessarily going to be the reality tomorrow.
The first story I would tell them would be watch out for the guys who love to tell stories. Because in my experience, show me a guy who can't shut up about himself, and I'll show you a guy who's full of crud. That said, I got some real doozies in that regard. But I would say, I would select any one of a lot of stories about finding yourself in a position where you have the ability to exert influence way beyond anything you'd ever have the ability to do based on your time in service or your rank. And it would be a fool's errand to try to anticipate what those positions are going to be. But every once in a while, and I think this is going to be the case in the future for young leaders, you're going to find yourself in a position where you can make a decision. Maybe you're in a conversation, the Afghan president or somebody just happened to stop by and asked you a question, and it's going to have consequences. Or you're in a meeting with some sheikhs and they're deciding something that's going to, and you realize, wow, what they decide to do is going to have heavy consequences. Maybe it's going to be, your troops have made a bad decision, and you can choose to cover it up. Or you can choose to expose it to the light of day and take the consequences, which are going to be painful for everybody. And 100 other possible, 10,000 other possible permutations of that. And the best way to be ready for that is to do what you know is right rather than what you know is easy. Be the moral compass of your organization. Be smart. Be brave, do what's right, and ultimately, the results of that will be positive for your organization, for your country, and for the whole world.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Scott Kinner with the Marine Corps Tactics and Operations Group. I get paid to write a lot of stuff, which is probably not worth reading, but I want to start there because we've heard a lot of things. Just here in this very first day, disruptive thinkers, creative thinkers, lessons learned, and about protecting creative thinkers and encouraging that. And at the same time, we're talking about a drawdown, and those that have lived through drawdowns before understand words like zero tolerance. And we've already alluded, some of the panel members have already alluded to the fact that selection and retention criteria are getting more and more narrow. All that comes back down. Oh, and one last thing, at least in the Marine Corps Gazette, we've had a fairly healthy but public food fight between general officers and young company grade officers about being trusted. And so, you being those folks who are going to take the torch forward, that next generation, what is the health and the culture of your service? Do you have a voice?
I think it's, I'm going to speak first as the Marine. I think it's great. There's always room for improvement, and I think things that like we see going on in the Gazette right now, some of the discussions back and forth, are healthy things, but I think ultimately you can go too far in either direction. I mean, obviously the young company grades don't run the Marine Corps. We don't want them to, for good reason. We have our general officers, and we hold them in high regard, and we, ultimately they're the ones giving the orders that we're going out and we're executing. But I think in any command, there just needs to be a healthy dialogue, and the more dialogue we can have in safe environments like you're talking about in the Gazette. Lieutenant General Halick, who's our Marine Forces commander here in the Norfolk Hampton Roads area, started blogging a couple months ago, and it's just interesting to see someone who's been in the Marine Corps longer than I've been alive, who's got 3 stars on his collar, doing something like blogging. And well, the first thought I had, well, geez, why is this guy blogging? Well, it's because he understands that this is another opportunity for him to, in a safer environment to have that exchange where someone may not come up. I may not go up to General Halick and say, hey, sir, you said this the other day. I think that's a bunch of garbage. I may not feel the freedom to say that, but when I want to comment on his blog, I may be more inclined to do that. Obviously, that does lose some of the impact. If I choose to blog anonymously, and I think this is one thing we tend to lose sight of, when people go online and they tend to do this stuff anonymously, it's not going to have the same impact, I don't think necessarily, as me coming up as Captain Swaim, SJ over at the Security Cooperation Group, and saying, hey, sir, this is one issue I see from where I sit. Should I have the general's ear for 5 minutes? So. At any rate, though, I think it is healthy in the Marine Corps. I'm only speaking to the Marine Corps, of course. But again, this is one of those things where we look to the commanders, and the commanders really are the ones who set the tone on that. They're the ones who need to open up the dialogue, the communication, and then it's up to the officers and the staff below him or her to really take those opportunities when they're provided.
Speaking from my staff position right now, I've already answered 3 taskers that eventually trickled down from the 4-star level because they went to the base and just had an open forum, and a couple 03s and 02s popped off some questions, and they took the time to chase those down and get the RFIs answered. So I would say I have pretty proof positive that those guys have a voice down there.
Go ahead.
Having worked as a flag lieutenant, saw just that, situations where the admiral I was working for would ask questions at all hands and really work hard to hone in on issues within the Coast Guard, within the service. So definitely working in that regard to ensure that the deck plate level concerns are heard by senior leadership.
Yeah, I think that certainly the most improved program that I think that has taken place, at least in the Navy, is that open door policy, where if my boss wants to talk to me or my sailor wants to come to me and talk to me about anything, I think that's probably one of the biggest improvements we've had. So I think everyone has a voice and everyone wants to listen, and the people that work beneath you certainly come to you and they don't fear any sort of retribution whatsoever.
I have yet to encounter a flag level officer who is not open to, direct interaction with subordinates, direct feedback, even criticism from the field. Where the machine breaks down is with all the minders, with the staff and the organizers and the guys who are saying, sir, you've got another meeting at, in 15 minutes and we've got to get you on a bird to fly to the Pentagon and do such and such. The door may be open, but the leader may not be in the office. He may be on the other side of the country doing something because he is just that busy and his time is that precious. So it's not so much it's not so much the intimidation factor as it is just a scheduling factor. And it's tough to get through the bureaucracy. It's tough to get through all the secretaries and administrative assistants and 05s and 06s who are around there managing and controlling and working the message and keeping everything organized. That's where it's difficult. It's difficult to get through that barrier. Partly that's just the nature of bureaucracy. I'm part of the problem. I'm one of those guys right now. I try not to be, but it's challenging to keep the leader on task, in the right place at the right time to do the things that he or she has to do, and find the time to get all that dialogue that the leader wants to have. But it's tough to fit it all in, and that's a challenge that we're still working with.
Great. Yes, sir.
Appreciate your service, Admiral. Good afternoon. I'm an OIF vet, or I was on the staff over there in Baghdad. I know, I appreciate a lot of those stories. I have a basic question. You are mid-level leaders in the military. The people look at you, the enlisted folks look at you as their leaders, not the generals. They look at them as way up here. You're the face. Okay, so I have a basic question. World War I, we won. World War II, clear victory. Korea, tie. Vietnam, loss. You got the Cold War, economic win. You had the Desert Storm, kind of a non-complete win. All right, now we got these two things going on right now, and you all been there. When your troop looks at you and says, in a year or so, did we win? Or are we going to win? And they're going to the next one, and they say, can we win again? Will they let us win? You guys have got to learn, know what the answer is to that. I'd like to hear your views on victory, winning. I hear a lot of things about economics, staffing, careerism. I want to know about your thoughts in the future of my military now, of winning. Can America win again? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to borrow an answer that was given just a ways back here. Just talking about, we started off talking about budgets, right? That DOD, that's on everyone's mind, budgets and things like that. And one of the responses was, more focused on like, hey, I'm not going to worry about the budget so much. That's not my job. That's not what I'm tasked with. I'm just focused on, here's my mission, here's what I'm charged with, and here's what I've got to go do. I've had this conversation with a lot of friends of mine who have served or who are serving in Afghanistan, and this has been something that they have wrestled with. And again, I haven't been to Afghanistan, so I'm not speaking from any personal experience on that note. But drawing from other experiences I've had is, you focus on your mission at hand. And you're right. I mean, we're mid-level career officers. We're not the general officers. I mean, are we winning the war in Iraq, or did we win the war in Iraq? Are we winning the war in Afghanistan? Shoot, that's not really my call to make. I mean, I might have opinions, but they're just opinions. But what is my mission? When I go to Afghanistan, when I'm in Iraq, my mission is X, Y, or Z. I have to accomplish this. That's how I'm going to measure success for my Marines who are under my charge. I'm going to strip away, yes, other things may be going on at much higher levels, but I can't control it. And I'm not necessarily going to try to package it and spin it for my Marines, because they're going to see right through it. But I want to get my Marines focused on this is the thing we can reach out and we can touch. It may make the difference on a strategic level. It may not even, it may not at all touch that level. But we are going to master it, we're going to win it, we're going to dominate it, and we're going to do it successfully, and we're going to do it with our pride and integrity intact. And that's what I would focus on for my young Marines who are working under my charge.
I actually had this exact conversation with one of my young former non-commissioned officers, not maybe 2 weeks ago. I was up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania at the Army War College on another conference. And as I was driving onto the post, the gate guard, one of the civilian, rent-a-cops there, was Sergeant Martz, one of my old NCOs from Charlie 1st to 50 Deuce. He's gotten out of the military, now he's working up there, and he's like, hey, sir. So, we got together for a burger and a couple beers one night, and he asked me, hey, sir, when we were up there, it seemed like, most of what we were doing seemed like a bunch of BS. I mean, it seemed like we were just, patrolling, and going in meetings with all these neighborhood council members, and he said, did we actually accomplish anything? And I said to him, you remember what it was like when we showed up there, right? Our sector, it was like a ghost town. It was tumbleweeds at night. People were afraid, they didn't come out of their houses. And you remember what it was like when we left, right? It's like, yeah, the markets were jumping, kids were playing soccer in the streets till midnight. Factories were opening up, people felt safe, we were catching bad guys. And I told them, listen, we probably wasted a lot of time, we probably wasted a lot of effort, but when we left our area better than we got it. And for us, for you and me, that's victory. Are all those small victories going to equal strategic victory in Iraq? I mean, to quote, I forget, it was Joe and Lai or somebody, it's too soon to tell about the French Revolution. History will decide whether we were successful in Iraq. I don't know. But I know that I could look you in the eye, and I could look any of my soldiers in the eye and tell you my unit was successful there. We made life better for the people in our area, and we won. And at a small unit level, I think that's where you want to be. I may have just totally punted on your actual question, but that's my take on it.
Yes, sir. Back to the story I gave you earlier about the two kids playing basketball, and when the whole thing, all these campaigns start off, kind of my mindset is, yeah, of course, I have my orders and my duty to support the President of the United States and the Constitution, and kind of the way the spin I put it on my sailors is really, there is a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me that are making a lot of decisions with all the facts to send those men and women into combat. And it's not like anyone's going to just say, yeah, let's just send those boys in and see what happens. So my take on it is really, did we win or are we going to win? We're going to win because smart people make good decisions with people's lives.
In the year that I was over in the Northern Arabian Gulf, protecting the oil platform off the Iraqi coast, in the first months that I reported in and took command in 2009, the U.S. and the coalition were doing the entire security mission for both the northern platform and the southern platform. In the year that I was there, the transition occurred where the Iraqis were taking on a good majority of that oil platform security mission that they have pretty much 100% right now. Seeing that transition was, to me, a success story that they were able to take on the mission and the security of doing that themselves. What I think is we'll see down the road is whether they're able to maintain that, because the economic vitality of Iraq and their ability to maintain an economy and a stable political system is what will be the long-term telltale sign. But a good portion of that is providing security for the oil that they're exporting off those two platforms.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ed Riglowitz, U.S. PACOM J6 staff. Aloha, Admiral.
Aloha.
Gentlemen, what do you tell these 01s and 02s about careerism and it's all about me attitude that we see so pervasive, not only in our society, but it's kind of creeping into our military too, and motivate these folks to look at it in a different way?
I would say that when I'm talking to young guys, I'm telling them just to focus on the job. That's all they should be worried about right then. They start talking to me about, well, should I be savvy on budget cycles and forget all that stuff. Just focus on the job, run the team, and then as you progress, kind of the advice that was given to me was always just focus on whatever task you're given, whatever job you're given. Just crush it, do as best as you can, and then the rest will take care of itself. So, I think that advice I'll probably hand down to the next guy. And so far, I think for the most part, it does take care of itself. I think guys that perform and just focus on the job, that's noticed, and guys that focus on careerism, that's also noticed.
Being aboard a small ship, it's myself. I have an XO that's an 02 and just newly reported ensign in 01, and trying to instill to them that it's not so much about them, it's the team as a whole, it's the unit as a whole, and that their job is to ensure that we're able to operate and meet the mission demands that we have as a team is crucially important. Clearly, they have their own career goals that they need to focus on, but keep ensuring that the focus is on the mission at hand and a positive attitude.
A lot of guys, it surprises me that how much my previous leaders were correct. But when they told you, don't worry about the fit reps, don't worry about the evals, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just do the best you can. And of course, at that level, at the 03, 02 level, you're worried about getting the next job, and it's absolutely true. And kind of my spin that I put on it is just don't worry about it. Do the best you can. And certainly do what's best for your people, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Best leadership advice I ever got was lead the way you want to be led. You can see it in your own leaders, and I think almost everyone in the audience here has been in many leadership positions, and everyone can remember the leaders who were the careerists, the ones that everybody would kind of grumble about and be like, oh yeah, they're just trying to get another bullet for their sit rep or their OER. Don't be that leader. Lead the way you want to be led. Be the leader that you want to be your leader. If you do that, you'll be okay. It's the best advice I ever got, and it's the advice I give to everyone who serves under me.
Thanks for your service.
Just one thing I'd add to that as well is just, what I'll tell the young guys is just, be a team player, and, fitter ups will take care of themselves, is always prudent advice. But, are they really invested? Are they invested in the command and what the command's doing or whatever the mission is? And, I could draw from several examples where you look at a command and you see a small group of guys who are doing almost all the work. And then you got these guys who are on the fringe who, they show up. They're there whenever they're supposed to be there. Are they there till, 16:30? Yep. But are they there at 16:31? No, they're gone. Because it really, they've adapted, it's about them and they're just focused on punching the clock and doing their own thing. And who knows where they'll end up, but if you really want to maximize, an experience like this, you gotta be all in. All the chips have to be in. You got to be invested. You got to be. When you get that last minute, hey, we need someone to go to the Republic of Georgia. Tag, you're it. Are you the guy who's going to gripe and try to get out of it, or are you the guy who's going to say, okay, great, awesome. What do I need to know? The more you're like that, the more good things are going to keep coming from it.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Peter Schwartz, retired Navy captain, now at the Center for Naval Analyses. And the question is about the situation regarding, and something you've alluded to already in passing, for want of a better term, the generation gap regarding IT. And the reason I call it the situation is because I've been out of the Navy now over 20 years, but I can recall when I was last in, leaders then, like Admiral Mackey, who was here before me, Admiral Keating, talking about and thinking about the problem of young guys coming in who are so IT savvy, and all us old guys who really didn't understand that stuff, and how that was revolutionized. That was 20 years ago. And those guys are now the lieutenant colonels and the senior enlisted and so on, and there's a new generation. And from what I can see from my perch working for a FFRDC and reading the paper and just being a citizen with email, which came in the last 2 years in my career, things have gotten even more compressed, that it is very easy for new young people to come in to have a whole host of skills that more senior people don't have and all the way up. How's that playing out right now? What's that feel like right now, beyond just the puff pieces that you see, the features in the newspaper? That dates me, right? Newspaper? Right.
Thanks, Peter.
If I could share one story, I don't know how tech savvy I am, because every day I'm getting that much older, and that means there's a younger guy who's that much savvier than I am. But I just got a new computer at work a couple weeks ago, and I was so excited. Little kid in the candy store, I get this new bright shiny object, and they bring what? They bring this ginormous tower that looks like it came out of like 1997. And I just thought, hey, I thought I was getting a new computer. What's going on? Well, this is your new computer, sir. I said, well, you got to be kidding me. So in that sense, it's a little frustrating because, to tie into something we talked about earlier, the budgeting and how we, if we could change one thing, okay, the way we do our budgeting process, we kind of do tie our hands. We get this technology that is so old based on the way the contracts are written and just the flash to bang, if you will, of when we contracted for that machine and when we had to purchase it to when it actually arrives at a workstation. So anyway, it's frustrating though with all the limitations that we have on this technology. We have all this great technology out there, and all these the young Marines, they got these phones that are more powerful and more capable than their work computers. And we have some very high-tech gear that have similar capabilities. But if I read another story about an Army soldier who built an iPhone app that does, some whiz-bang thing that we paid $10 million to build the same piece of gear, I'll pull my hair out. It's a constant challenge. I'm glad I'm not a commo type. For those of you commos out there, I'm glad I don't have your job, because I understand that's a difficult challenge to keep up with. But I don't know that really answered your question, sir, although it gave me an opportunity to kind of vent about something that I love to vent about. So thank you.
Sir, in my experience, I haven't encountered as many situations where there's a gap in the younger generation's ability to use technology better than the older generation, as it is a kind of the way they process information and relate to other people. Maybe it goes with the social networking, maybe it goes with Twitter, maybe it goes with all the hours playing video games. But you know, in interaction after interaction, I see it and I hear it from other leaders of my generation and generations before me that, you know, these kids, you can't talk to them the same way. They don't relate to people the same way that we did. And to be honest with you, I can't really maybe tell you exactly what that difference really is. I think if anybody could really capture that, then we could solve the problem. But there is a gap there. We try to relate by giving them smartphones. We try to relate by altering the way that we, you know, conduct training. We try to relate by the way that we, you know, give instruction. We try to alter our initial training and our military school systems. And I think there's probably been a lot of goodness from that. But it's going to be a challenge that we're going to probably continue to have to deal with until the next generation comes along and makes them a bunch of old dinosaurs.
For you guys on the panel, thanks. Two things in closing. One, I'm sure I speak for Admiral Daly as the head of the Institute and all of the rest of us in expressing our gratitude for your contributions today, but much more importantly, for the sacrifices you've made over the past 10 years or so since you've been in. And part two of that is our request that you, when you're home tonight, thank your family, each of you. Geez, find one. Call your mom or dad. Anyway, thank your families for us, because they too have contributed to the security that we enjoy. And before I ask the audience to join me in a round of applause, I would give you a personal observation. At any time I have to spend time in the company of young men and women in uniform today, I'm reassured. And I would place on your shoulders squarely our hopes and our confidence in the future of our nation and increased security and stability throughout the world. Thanks very much, men. We're grateful to you.